Hi, welcome back. We're going to go over an example of disjunction elimination. So this is an example that we're going to work through now that I have written up here. So if you haven't yet seen the video on disjunction elimination, then I suggest that we go back and look at that first before going over this example, just so you know what exactly it is, the rule that we're going to be using. Okay, so here I have a problem, and we have these primary assumption, and there's four of them. So we have the disjunction A or B, and then we have three conditionals. We have if B then D, if A then E, and if E then D. Let's number these as well. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and I mistakenly used a different color. Let me go back to this. Okay, and here's the goal. I want us to derive, we're going to derive D. This is our goal. So we want to derive D. So that means that we want as our last line in the derivation to just be the sentence D. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use disjunction elimination as we did before. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first assume A and try to get D. And then we're going to assume B and still try to get D. And once we have both of those, then disjunction elimination allows us to take D to close the two subderivations and take D out into the main scope line. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's take as our first auxiliary assumption, we'll do A, right? Because this is the first disjunct of this disjunction. And if we look, we see that D here is embedded as the consequent of this main conditional, where E is the antecedent. And E is the consequent of this material conditional where A is the antecedent. And we have, in our case, A already. So you can see that I've been reasoning sort of backwards first to try to figure out where D is in the first place, and then what I'm going to try to do is see what kind of work I can do using the auxiliary assumption that I have. And so by this sort of backwards chaining, I can get D. So in the first step, what I do is I use 3 and I use the material elimination conditional elimination using 3 and my auxiliary assumption, which is on line 5, to get E. And this will make line 6. And the justification here is going to be the conditional elimination, and I have to cite 2 lines as justification, right? So I used line 3, that's where my conditional was, and then I used line 5 to discharge that, right? Because this is the antecedent here, to then get the consequent E out. And now that I have E, I can actually use the conditional elimination again to actually get D out. So we'll have this as line 7. I can get D from, again, conditional elimination from lines 4 and 6. Okay, so that's what I've gotten, at least under the assumption of the one disjunct, I've gotten D. So far so good. Now the trick is going to be to try to get that same conclusion by assuming B. So let's make, in this next case, let us assume that I have B as my auxiliary assumption. And actually, maybe we should do this properly here as well. We should write beside here assumption. And I'm just going to write as with a dot beside it for short form. And you can laugh about that at home. But this is actually short for assumption. It's not me just cussing on the whiteboard. So now we've made B our auxiliary assumption. And we're going to try to get D in the subderivation. So we notice that this is actually going to be fairly easy, right? 2, this conditional already has D as a consequent, and here we have B as our auxiliary assumption, so we can actually discharge this, and we can actually just get D. So let me put these line numbers right here. We can get D by using conditional elimination. And we have to cite here line 2, and then we have to cite line 8 as well, because that was the antecedent for the conjunction that we just, or for the conditional, sorry, that we just discharged. Okay, so now, given the rule for disjunction elimination says you need to start out with a disjunction. and you need to assume the first disjunct and derive some sentence. You assume the second disjunct and derive that same sentence, and in that case you can then close these two subderivations, and you get to conclude the conclusion of both of those subderivations. So here then we would use disjunction elimination, and the justification would be line 1, right? This is our disjunction that we started out with. And then we did the first subderivation where we assumed the left disjunct, so that'll be lines 5 to line 7. And then we assumed the second disjunct, and we used, when we assumed that, we got D, and we only actually had to do one line here, so we only have to cite the subderivation from 8 to 9. It's relatively short. And that's it. So that's how, this is an example of how you would use disjunction elimination to derive a conclusion. Okay, so if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment or send me an email or raise them in class.